Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. At this time, please turn off all electronic devices. Please refrain from using flash photography during the program. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Joni Ernst.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Zackheim, director of the Reagan Institute. As many of you know, the Institute is home of the Reagan Foundation in Washington, D.C. We're just across Lafayette Park from the White House. This past June, we hosted our grand opening, so we are absolutely ready for all of you to come to Washington, D.C. and visit us there. Plan your trips. We'll welcome you. As is our tradition at the library, in honor of our men and women who defend our freedom around the world, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Now, before we get started, there is one person in the audience I'd like to recognize. Please join me in welcoming best-selling musical and Grammy-nominated artist, John Ondrasik. Welcome, John. It's my honor to welcome you here tonight, and looking at the crowd, I know for many of you, it's a welcome back. You've been participants in this series that's been going on now for over a year. And you know this series, the Time for Choosing series, takes its name from Ronald Reagan's famous speech from 1964. You know that televised address launched his political career, a career in which he galvanized the conservative movement, reshaped a party, and transformed the world. And you also know the Republican Party today is facing its own time for choosing. Leading up to the midterm elections, ahead of the next presidential race, how will the party choose to define itself? Will the party only look backward? Or, like Ronald Reagan, will it focus on the future? Will it be a party that adheres only to dogma? Or like Reagan did, keep an open mind for principled, pragmatic solutions? These are open questions. So too is the question of which party will control the United States Senate after Americans vote in 2.5 months. It may come down to the path the party chooses to take. So tonight, we're honored to welcome a speaker who hails from the upper chamber to answer these questions. She also hails from Iowa, the state that launches presidential races and reshapes many campaigns. Now, don't worry, Senator. The Reagan Library doesn't hold a grudge over the 1980 caucus results. It all worked out in the end. Now, with all that in mind, Senator Ernst has a keen eye for where the party is headed, or, more accurately, where it should be going. She is also a path-breaking senator with several firsts to her name. She was the first woman to serve in federal elected office from the state of Iowa. She became the first female combat veteran elected to serve in the Senate. And unless I'm mistaken, she's the first U.S. senator sent to Washington with a specific mandate to, quote, make him squeal. Now, since taking office in 2015, she has demonstrated that her leadership is informed by experience. You see, working to make ends meet is not a foreign concept to Senator Ernst. She learned about hard work growing up on an Iowa farm. National security is not an academic theory for her either. She wore the uniform for more than 23 years and served as a company commander in Kuwait and Iraq. Senator, thank you for your service. Protecting women from violence is not a talking point for her. She's a survivor, and she helped lead the successful Violence Against Women's Act reauthorization this year. Senator Ernst brings a perspective not rooted in partisanship, but in reality, a reality that can be challenging and complicated. So we welcome this perspective tonight. Since May of 2021, many leading Republicans have joined this conversation. Members of Congress, governors, former secretaries, ambassadors, and more. We asked them all the same questions we've asked Senator Ernst to address this evening. What policies can the GOP agree on? What does it mean to be a Republican in 2022? Which principles are paramount? And we've given all our speakers the same instructions. We're not looking for slogans. We're not looking for sound bites. We're looking for substance, and we're looking for solutions. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a veteran, a public servant, a daughter of the heartland, a West Point mother, Senator Joni Ernst from the great state of Iowa.
So much. God bless you. Thank you, everyone. What an honor to be here with you this evening. And Roger, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I really do appreciate that. And it truly is an honor to be with you this evening in this beautiful place. I think we can look around and just feel the presence of President Ronald Reagan. I've had the great privilege and honor of being part of the annual Reagan National Defense Forum a number of times right here in this very pavilion. But I must say that tonight is uniquely special. And I'm grateful to have been chosen to speak as part of this important series on the future of our party, our country, and the ways that we can together continue striving towards becoming that more perfect union. I'm fortunate to have grown up in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was president. He was one of those once-in-a-generation leaders who really made us proud as a nation. He helped us understand our purpose in the world and our role in history. President Reagan inspired so many young Americans, even Iowa Hawkeye football fans. So yes, a little known fact about our 40th president, he was the chief sports announcer at WHO Radio in Des Moines, Iowa, and the voice of Iowa Hawkeye football in 1933. So Ronald Reagan inspired all of us to believe in our country and ourselves, and to go into public service to make this world a better place. For the 30 years prior to his presidency, an iron curtain held back much of our world from experiencing true freedom. Reagan's faith in America, in his fellow citizens, and the desire of all men to live free set the stage for our country's triumph over communism in the late 20th century, and inspired a global revolution whereby dozens of nations chose and continue to choose freedom over tyranny. Growing up on a farm in rural southwest Iowa, I thought of my service in the context of my community. George Washington once said, "I would rather be on my farm than be emperor of the world." And I couldn't agree more. Montgomery County, Iowa is still my home. We certainly didn't have much growing up, but what we lacked in money, my mother made up for us in love. And my dad taught my brother, my sister, and me the value of hard work, service, and sacrifice. Never in a million years did I ever think I would serve in the United States Senate. I was going to be a nurse or a farmer's wife, and in my wildest dreams, Miss America. Not quite tall enough, but God had other plans. God used an agricultural exchange program to expand my horizons and remind me how blessed I am to have been born in America. And it truly inspired me to serve. While I was in college, I had the opportunity to take part in an agricultural exchange program to Ukraine. And that was when it was still part of the Soviet Union. As a student who'd never been out of the country, folks, I had never been on a plane before in my life. I was eager to leave home and have those new experiences, but I was not quite prepared to see a communist country up close. The first night on that collective farm in Ukraine, I so clearly remember what our conversations centered around. It was freedom. The Ukrainians asked me, "What's it like to be free? What's it like to be an American?" Seeing how they lived deepened my love of America, and it compelled me to recognize the strength, freedom, and leadership we far too often take for granted. Upon my return home, I joined Army ROTC. It was the best decision I ever made. I served for 23 years in uniform, including my time as a company commander leading 150 soldiers in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Executing a mission to secure our homeland from terror and doing so alongside millions of my fellow military service members who were willing to pay the costs of freedom firsthand made me very proud. My deployment to the Middle East sealed my intent to pursue lifelong service to our great country. We're imperfect, but American freedom, our concept of liberty and inalienable rights, and the lengths we're willing to go to protect them, comprise the most exceptional form of government on earth. It's so easy to take for granted the freedoms afforded to us just by being born in America. And when this attitude of ungratefulness goes unchecked, it can quickly lead to pure disdain and even hatred. Our military is facing the lowest recruitment numbers since the Vietnam War. And our police departments across the country are understaffed. One reason why? the American Apology Tour being conducted by the left and amplified by their friends in the media. From foreign policy to domestic concerns, the Democratic Party is pushing America to blend in and to forget the very exceptionalism that makes us the greatest nation on the face of the planet. As Republicans, we may not be able to change their very dark perspective, but we have an obligation to our children and future generations to inspire the rest of the world to keep proving the American experiment is a success and it's one worth fighting for. Our founding fathers prescribed a federal government with limited responsibilities, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And over time, we have made great strides to better fulfill that purpose. Our founders wanted to keep the republic from becoming a nation ruled by liberal elitist classes in a faraway capital, not to be bothered by the plight of the working American. Instead, they envisioned a citizen legislature made up of individuals from all backgrounds and all walks of life, like mine. While a new academic and political class focuses on the sins of our past to condemn our nation today, can anyone genuinely argue that our country or the world would be better off without the system established by our founding fathers nearly 250 years ago? The Reagan Revolution was not born from the battle for the soul of our nation or a redefinition of the government's relationship with its people. It most certainly was not a new entitlement program or a wealth redistribution plan. On the contrary, Ronald Reagan recognized life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and our other inalienable rights as Americans are the core commitments of a government to its people, commitments that must be protected above all else. The tendency of government over the ages has always been to acquire more and more power at the expense of the people. Washington has taken over functions that truly don't belong to it. And as Republicans, we should be focusing on distributing back to the people the powers that belong to the people. And as Reagan said in that first case, when Washington takes over those powers, in almost every case, it has been a failure. The bureaucracy is as bloated as ever, with even less transparency and accountability. Even the smallest change is a challenge. Many of you may remember, and as Roger pointed out, that Iowans elected me with the commitment to make Washington squeal. But after nearly 8 years in Washington, I often feel I am the only one that is squealing. Skepticism of what happens in Washington is not a new phenomenon. But for far too long in Republican politics, we failed to realize the strong undertones in our own electorate. President Trump's "Drain the Swamp" slogan was really simple. People congregated towards it because it resonated with them. They truly believe Washington has either left them behind or is out to get them. He tapped into the forgotten man and woman, like my brother and my sister, who for so long felt snubbed by coastal, out-of-touch elites. Republicans, we must learn from this, and we must continue to celebrate everyday working families by getting Washington off their backs, out of their businesses, and away from their families. In Iowa, Chuck Grassley and I do what's known as the Full Grassley, okay? Named after Chuck. He started this so many years ago. The 99 county tour. We visit every county in Iowa every single year. We hold public town halls and we walk up and down our main streets. And we do this for multiple reasons. It's really simple. Top of importance to us is hearing directly from the constituents that we are so fortunate to represent. We are accessible and accountable to the people who have offered us the great opportunity to serve them as our founders intended. And in order to uphold the founders' intent, there were select powers prescribed to the federal government. And arguably the most important of these powers is to protect our people and our way of life. Protection starts with the basics right here at home. We have to secure our borders. And I know you have heard that phrase a lot, but it has to be done. The reality is, an enforceable, clear boundary and preserved border is statecraft and deterrence 101. It's that simple. Without it, there's a clear incentive to take advantage of America's compassion and our rich history of immigration. Just last month, Border Patrol told me that 30% of the young girls and women who are being trafficked across the border by the cartels are being sexually assaulted. And the heartbreaking reality is some of those women and girls never make it as far as our border. The cartels take pride in these actions. Hear me, folks, and I know this is difficult. These ruthless monsters take pride in raping innocent women and children. They take pride in flowing drugs across our border, so lethal they can kill you with just the smallest dose. And friends, those drugs don't just stay in Texas or Arizona. No, they travel up I-35 into Des Moines and Mason City. And they're wreaking havoc on the lives of my fellow Iowans. Without a strong, secure border, the lawlessness we're witnessing is going to continue. And sadly, it's already bleeding into our streets. At 32 years old and 7 months pregnant, Jessica Covington of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was murdered in cold blood while she was unloading gifts from her very own baby shower. Miss Covington's story, though it's extremely tragic, sadly is not unique. Her death is just a snapshot of the crime that is running rampant in our communities, both urban and rural. Republicans have long been the party of law and order. But it can't just be mere words we speak or a catchphrase that we can put on some bumper sticker. It's got to be more. We actually have to be willing to do what it takes to ensure safety. So yes, that's funding and wholeheartedly supporting the police. But it's also ensuring mental health access for students and families. It's ensuring our prosecutors are holding everyone who breaks the law accountable for their actions. It's once again restoring hope in our federal law enforcement agencies through greater transparency and accountability. And most pressing, it's restoring the value of life and the family. Maybe more than ever in our nation's history, we must stand up for the rule of law. But I would contend it begins with defending and valuing human life. Ronald Reagan once said, "An America that is militarily and economically strong is not enough. The world must see an America that is morally strong with a creed and a vision. For us, values count." Values do count in America, and they must be consistently applied across all sectors of our economy and government. The Democratic Party, now they claim human rights as their central component of their policy platform. Never mind their stunning hypocrisy on energy policy. Proponents of a radical climate agenda portray themselves as heroes in a fairy tale, riding to the rescue. Of course, they're riding to the rescue on an electric vehicle to defeat the greedy corporations polluting the planet for profit so we can all live happily ever after. But the postscript to this fantasy reveals the electric vehicle supply chain is powered primarily by communist China's state-supported corporations, often using slave and child labor. But it's not just EV batteries. When the Biden administration rapidly and haphazardly pulled out of Afghanistan, they left behind a treasure trove to the tune of $1 trillion of rare earth and critical minerals that make up the utilities and technologies that we use every single day. The key materials used to power your cell phones, the TV that so many of us like to binge watch Netflix on, and even the MRI machine that maybe helped diagnose your son's cancer. God has gifted America with an abundance of resources. And instead of a sharp left turn to renewables before we can even sustain our needs, we should once again allow U.S. energy producers to flourish. And when we do, we remove the risk of relying on authoritarians who don't adhere to our American ideals to power and fuel our lives. The U.S. must return to energy independence. Friends, it is abundantly clear the world is more interconnected than ever. And this world, well, it's not inert. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. And more likely today, trending towards chaos. The Commander-in-Chief's policy choices regarding the operations of our diplomats and military members must be in service of American security and prosperity above all else. It's not up for debate. Our nation's security and prosperity have declined, and done so very quickly under President Biden. His choices demonstrate a cruel mix of appeasement in the name of international consensus and a feeble inability to assume risk to defend our very own homeland. Safety from the wrath and intent of those who seek to do America and our freedom-loving partners harm is not a guarantee. Without a change in vision, chaos will continue to reign. 1 year ago, over the advice of his experts and top military advisors, President Biden forced a rushed and haphazard exit from Afghanistan, leaving behind nearly 800 Americans and many allies. Today, the murderous Taliban regime is back in power. They're back in power. Violent extremist organizations have reconvened to plot their next move against America. And Afghan women and girls are once again under the restrictive, barbaric policies of terrorists. Beyond the on-ground disaster and terrorist activity in Afghanistan, America's retreat greatly damaged our credibility. Our adversaries learned that the president was not willing to bear the cost of achieving our goals, but rather he was willing to lie for domestic political cover. These realities and a lack of deterrence emboldened Vladimir Putin, greenlighting a new war in Europe and a heart-wrenching global food crisis. Ukraine, much like Iowa, is a heavy ag-based economy, and it is considered to be the breadbasket of Europe. Approximately 400 million people are dependent on food from Ukraine. And at least 14 African countries import half of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine, including Egypt, who is the world's largest wheat importer. Because of Putin's war, people are literally starving. Famine is on the rise. And so often with famine, we see unrest, even terrorist activity. So not only is this food crisis of immediate concern to many of our European partners, it's of clear importance to our security and stability here in the homeland. Earlier, I mentioned my time in Ukraine on a collective farm. While there, I became very close to the daughter of my host family, who I call my Ukrainian sister, Svetlana. When Putin made his unjust provocation, I quickly reconnected with Svetlana. She and her family are near Mykolaiv. It's a city of commerce, but one under constant Russian shelling. If more than 4 days goes by and I don't hear from her, my heart skips a beat, and I wonder if she's okay. She is living in a war zone. She's unsure every single day of what that day will bring. Imagine living like that, waking up in the morning, praying, hoping that a Russian missile doesn't hit your home and kill your loved ones. When left to their own devices and allowed to flourish, autocratic thugs like Putin will try to crush the innocent to maintain power. One adversary has been intently watching our president's doctrine of appeasement play out: China. The Chinese Communist Party has ambitions to expand its sphere of influence, not just in the East, but globally. Through their so-called Belt and Road Initiative, China is providing loans to countries around the world that they see as opportunities to leverage while continuing to build up their military capabilities and technologies. Countries like Panama. Think with me briefly about the economic impacts of China controlling the Panama Canal. The US is the top user of the Panama Canal. If this key shipping lane was handed over to our #1 adversary, I hate to even imagine the long-term economic and security impacts that would have on our American farmers, our businesses, and our families. Now, most immediately, China is looking toward their close-by island neighbor. We're all watching this. And America's partner, Taiwan. Why does this matter to the average Iowan or American? This goes back to my earlier point on critical minerals. The minerals we are too often sourcing from forced labor in Chinese or from Chinese-owned operations are then used to make chips and semiconductors in Taiwan. So if China were to invade and take Taiwan, then again, you can say goodbye to that new iPhone 25 or whatever the latest version would be, or the basic household appliances and electronics that all of us use every single day. So the CCP is our greatest near-peer adversary, no question about it. They require constant attention. But how can the US ever be expected to face down the world's largest army if we're unwilling to impose maximum pressure on the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism? The Biden administration continues to believe a very fanciful idea that American diplomats can just sit down with their Iranian counterparts and make peace, while denying the billions upon billions of dollars the regime is using to fund terrorist activities against the US, our service members, and our ally, Israel. The myth of a non-nuclear Iran in exchange for sanctions relief is absolutely ludicrous. Iran hates America. They have active bounties on U.S. national security officials. Any further appeasement of this terrorist state is malpractice. This could lead to grave, long-lasting consequences to our homeland. Ruthless dictators like Xi and Putin, and violent extremist organizations like the Taliban and terrorists in Iran only respond to strength. Friends, I don't want America to be the world's policeman. And I'm not advocating for a global democracy building and a return to former versions of Republican foreign policy. I believe in American leadership. Ronald Reagan's peace through strength. His understanding of American engagement was neither hawkish nor was it sentimental. Rather, Reagan understood the necessity of deterring our adversaries, standing by our allies, and ensuring the unmatched strength of the greatest lethal fighting force known to man, the American military. I believe in America first, always, but never America alone. Forging strong partnerships and allied networks are essential to America's security and prosperity. When I was deployed to Iraq and Kuwait, who was standing next to me? Ukrainians. Ukrainians. Our partners in the fight against terrorism. NATO, the world's leading multinational alliance, needs America to lead and to force our partners to bear their share of the resource burden. In the Middle East, we must work with our friend Israel and our Gulf state partners to counter Iranian aggression. In Africa, we must be willing to make a moderate investment in return for stability. Recently, I was having this wonderful conversation with the former commander of U.S. Special Forces in Africa. He was telling me how for years terrorism has been growing in that region. As he and other military leaders were assessing the instability, they advocated for a very small team. And folks, I'm talking about 12 service members, 12, to advise and stabilize and to ultimately keep the terror threat from the American homeland. America led, and 6 of our allied nations followed. This is my view of American leadership and global engagement. We're not here simply for the good of the world, but to provide security and stability in order to protect our country, our people, our freedoms, and our way of life. When given the freedom to choose, people around the world will embrace the American idea that our rights are not granted to us by the government, but rather an all-powerful God, and that government derives its authority from the people for the purpose of protecting their freedoms. My Ukrainian friends, they hungered for freedom, to live a life such as mine in America. It wasn't until August 24, 1991, 31 years from yesterday, that their dreams became a reality. It took strength and courage and freedom-loving fighters like Ronald Reagan to help lead the way. In our U.S. Army, which strengthened and developed me, leadership is not defined by your rank or by your title. Instead, it's about inspiring a group of individuals towards a common goal or objective for the good of the unit and the organization. Sometimes leadership means stepping aside, but most often leadership means stepping up. As Republicans, we have a choice. We can either sit on the sidelines, complain about the direction America is headed, or we can step up and fill the gap and inspire the next generation of leaders, the next generation of freedom-loving fighters. Now is not the time for America to shrink back. It's not the time to abandon our allies and partners. It's not the time to promote progressive fantasies at the expense of the security, stability, and prosperity of our own nation and its people. Now is the time for an unwavering commitment to restoring our federal government to its founding and limiting role of protection, including protection from intrusion by the government itself. Anything further is an assumption beyond our solemn obligation to the United States. We must be willing to do whatever it takes to ensure all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or socioeconomic status, are afforded the opportunity and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As Republican leaders, we can evaluate our success on the Reagan model. Did we leave the country and the world a safer and freer place for our children and our grandchildren? That is our challenge and our sacred mission. If we hope to live up to Ronald Reagan's expectations for our rendezvous with destiny. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Thank you. God bless all of you, and may God continue to bless our great United States of America. Thank you so much. Thank you.